But the policeman said, well, we're fighting the war on drugs, and we'd just like to search your vehicle. This is part of it. And the father had his son there, and he says, yeah, I'm totally against drugs. I'll do anything we can help to fight drugs. So the cop searches the vehicle, and he finds $2,000, you know. And the cop says, there's probable cause this could be drug money. I'm seizing the drug money and impounding the car. All right? And the guy goes, no, I'm a barber. I forget what he was, you know, an in-home massage therapist or whatever. And the cop says, well, nevertheless, we're going to seize it, and you can fight this one out with the DA. So the guy gets an attorney, and they go to the DA, and they're able to prove. Every week, this guy brings in about $1,000, $2,000, and he goes to the bank and does it. Now, you would think the DA would go, you know, you're right, Mr. So-and-so, this is not involved with drugs. Cool. And you know what the DA says? He says, okay, I'm going to make you a deal here. Ooh. Ears should go up like this as soon as you hear that. All right. He said, here's the deal. He said, you can go to court and you'll win the money back, but you won't have your car for a year and a half because it's going to take you a year and a half to go through this. And he said, it'll probably cost you $10,000 to $20,000 in legal fees to do it. So here's the deal. We'll split the money and I'll give you your car back. This goes on every single day here in this country. Okay? The stories just roll in. And people are getting hit by this. So that was the next war. What was the next war? The next war that started to deteriorate property rights and the assault on the Constitution. This came from the left this time. It's unfortunate it came from the left because when environmentalism started out, it was sort of a middle issue. Let's clean up the mess we've made. But all of a sudden, environmentalism made a hard cut to the left, embraced socialism, hated capitalism, and went off the trail. I say they went off the rails at that point. But it's the war to save the planet, in which landowners are deprived of the use of their property without just compensation. Their property can be regulated, they can be harassed, the property can be confiscated. In the West and in ranch lands and farmlands, farmers, there's been a regular range war going on between ranchers and farmers and government at various levels. In many cases, there have been environmental organizations teaming up with government agencies to drive inholders out. I was reading an article over Christmas vacation, National Geographic, about some of the Channel Islands off the coast of like Santa Barbara and down the coast of California there. And they're saying, well, these are now all, you know, lands being held in the public name for the preservation of humanity. What they didn't tell you is the harassment of the landowners that used to be there in order to get them off the property, threatening them with prosecution, seizing the property, etc. Okay, well, it's nice to save the planet, but I don't think those people are going to think very favorably about saving the planet when that happens. And the last assault that has now happened has been the war on terror. You know, I'm going to split this up and show you that both sides have been able to complicit in this whole thing. But as a Republican, I've just said to my fellow Republicans, shame on you. After 20 years of giving me America's God and country and complaining about how Bill and Hillary ripped up the Constitution in the 1990s or used the IRS to go after conservative groups or whatever they did, and they did do that, right? Large number of conservative talk show hosts and organizations were all audited by the IRS in the 1990s as a process of harassment, all right? Then the Republicans come in and they say, well, you know what, habeas corpus is not too important. Let's come up with this new concept called enemy combatant. How does this work? Well, if you're a U.S. citizen, you have all these rights. But if we say you're an enemy combatant, then you lose those rights. Ooh. But don't worry, you're not a terrorist. And my response whenever someone has said that is to say, well, not yet anyway, because the definition of terrorist is one of those floating, fungible definitions, and we can just sort of slide the definition back or forth as we need to be. You know, what happens when a terrorist becomes someone who speaks out against government policy, which is what we're guaranteed under the First Amendment, right? The beauty of a free society is that we can all get on the radio, we can all talk, you can call into talk shows, you have liberals and conservatives and independents. That's what makes for a free society. But if you begin to prosecute that and say, well, if you speak out here or you speak out there, this frightens me. You know, I don't know of anywhere where we can be stripped of our rights, do you? But now we say we can do that for a good cause. But evil always rides in on the back of a white horse. I like to tell people, and this was a hard sell to Democrats in the 90s. On our show, we've had what we call equal opportunity critic. President Bush 1 didn't get off, President Clinton didn't get off, and President Bush 2 didn't get off. But I want to give you some example, trying to explain to people how what goes around comes around. And that's why when the founding fathers established the Constitution as a wall, they intended it as a one-way firewall. And the one-way firewall is the people would have access to their government, but the government would only have limited access to the people. There were restrictions that were put in there. That's why you hear terms in the Constitution like, shall not be infringed. That's the Second Amendment, right to bear arms. What part of shall not be infringed do you not understand? But today we have 20,000 laws, all of which infringe the right to bear arms. As a matter of fact, in some states, usually blue states, this is a left issue, you can't qualify for a concealed weapons permit. You even have to get a license. And even they say, oh yeah, and I read the one in California. It says, well, we respect the Second Amendment right to bear arms. And then they go, blah, 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 blah. By the time you're all done, you go, what you're telling me is I can't carry an arm if I want to defend myself. Well, yeah, that's sort of it. The joke about Kootenai County, Idaho, is the fact Kootenai County has more concealed weapons permits than the whole state of California. Because Washington and Idaho are shall-issue states, like most of the states around us here. Utah, Nevada, Montana. If you go north from here, the whole situation changes. Well, let's just pick on the Democrats for a while. Now we'll come back and pick on some of the Republicans. Democrats tend to start shenanigans. They've been really good at doing that because they're driven more by idealism rather than by details in the middle or long-term consequences. Republicans tend to take what the Democrats start and make them deeper, permanent, more formal, and expansive. We're frequently in more danger, I think, sometimes when Republicans are in control than Democrats. After Oklahoma City, President Clinton at the time, instead of uniting the country, and I remember this because Oklahoma City happened midweek, and we were driving down to southern Colorado. I had a meeting with, remember Don McElvaney, the guy who publishes the Gold newsletter? He had invited us down for the weekend. And we were listening to all of this. Now, this was an opportunity to try to unite the country and say, this is a terrible incident. Let's all get together and grieve over this incident together. But President Clinton said it was unpatriotic to criticize the government. He called dissenting voices hate radio and extremists and blamed them as being responsible. I remember reading Gary Bauer's end-of-day commentaries a few days later. He said everybody in Washington on the right was stumbling and scrambling over themselves to look moderate because everybody was so shocked by what had happened at Oklahoma City that as soon as President Clinton pointed the finger at them, they all went, whoa, and buckled. Now listen, it's unpatriotic to criticize the government, is what he said. Did Democrats really mean that? Because less than a decade later, they're sounding just like the Republicans did in the 1990s, In the 1990s, it was darn Bill, darn Hillary, and silly Al. This decade, it's been darn Bush, darn Cheney, darn Rumsfeld, darn Condi, from the very same people who told us just a decade ago it was extremist to be afraid of or wrong to criticize the government. In 1998, it was Vice President Al Gore who said the Constitution was a living, breathing document. I always vision the night of the living Constitution. It lives, it breathes, it changes as you watch it, that type of thing. Well, what did he mean by that? What he meant was, golly willikers, it really can't mean that we can't sort of do this program or can't do that program or do what we want. We can change it as we want to change it as it comes along. It'll just live and breathe. In essence, it doesn't really mean what it says because it was written by long-dead white racist slave owners who couldn't possibly have understood what we want to go through today, right? Okay. Well, did they really mean that? Because you see, just less than a decade later, they're all screaming about the fact that the Republicans and Bush are running all over the Constitution. Well, see, here's the problem. If you believe in a living, breathing Constitution, then you really can't complain when it lives and breathes in a way that you don't like. The Republicans were just living it and breathing it in a different way than the Democrats were doing. Once you let the horse out of the barn, you can't complain if somebody else jumps on and rides it. All right, and that's what they were doing. Now, to be honest with you, I think the Democrats should be complaining about some of the violations of the Constitution, just like they should have been listening when people were complaining about their violations of the Constitution, because the Bill of Rights goes together. It's a package deal unless we amend it. It's a package deal. So you can't complain over here about a lack of habeas corpus and some of the other rights, trial by jury, speedy trial, that are all being violated now in terms of the war on terror, and at the same time try to kill the right to bear arms. It goes together. They're all part of the same plank.